Hey, what's up guys? I wanted to do a quick video and talk to you about web components. Now, I first heard about them back in 2013. W3C released a version 0 spec. It was really experimental, demonstrating how you can create these custom web components using just vanilla JavaScript, and it seemed really interesting, but there wasn't much browser support. Recently, the Polymer framework that's created by Google released their version 2 release candidate, and it supports ES6 syntax and lets you create custom elements using the version 1 spec that W3C have just come out with, and it seems really cool. There's a whole website about it, webcomponents.org. For those of you who don't know what web components are or what I'm talking about, web components are like custom elements that are just totally encapsulated. So a great example is if you use Twitter Bootstrap framework, you know, you have all these components that they provide to you: nav bars, breadcrumbs, lists, and progress bars, and all of that. One of the difficult things is, you know, you always have to make sure you import the CSS. You have to either remember the markup that you need to use that custom component, or like me, you'll always be on their website copying and pasting. And you know, it gets a bit tedious. I always thought it would be great if you could do something like this, where you have just a custom component called progress bar. You can set some attributes on it and it'll fill in the blanks. It will add styling. Web components actually lets us achieve this. That's really cool. It does it outside of any frameworks. In fact, what's even better is you can use these components within your framework as well. I wanted to see how easy it is to code, say, a custom progress bar, and then look at how easy it would be to import that into, say, an Angular 2 project. Basically, see how easy it would be to create a component that could be used through a variety of different projects. So if you're using Angular 1 or using Angular 2 or even React, or you're not using a framework at all, we could use the same progress bar throughout. So let's dive into the code and see the process. I'm going to create a folder called progress bar, and I'll cd into that and load it into my editor. Really, our component is just comprised of just a simple class. So I'll create that class, set that to JavaScript, and basically the way you create it, if we look at the documentation that W3C provides, it's a very basic class that extends HTML element. That's if you want to create a very generic component, one that doesn't already exist or doesn't extend one that exists already. But you know, if you're creating, say, a button that maybe does some sort of animation every time you click it, you can extend different elements, so HTML button element, for example. But we'll stick to the basics for now. Going back to Sublime, so we'll call the class progress bar, and it will extend the HTML element interface. And the first thing we need to do is, in the constructor, call the parent constructor. This will give our component some sort of context and let us access some of the attributes from HTML element. The other thing that we're going to do in the constructor is we're going to set up a variable that we're going to call shadow, and we're going to set it to what's called a shadow DOM. And what the shadow DOM is it basically creates a DOM that's separate from the main document but is nested within that main document. And one of the things it lets us do is add styling to our component that doesn't affect any of the classes outside. So if we use a progress bar class and there's already a progress bar class somewhere else in our project, any styling we add within our custom component won't affect anything outside. So it's encapsulated, and it's really convenient, especially when you create a component that you want to distribute, say on Bower or NPM. So if we want to achieve something like this, where we've got a complete attribute that basically sets how much of the progress bar is going to be filled, we can just create that variable here too, and we'll default it to 0. We'll add a couple of methods to get and set that variable. So complete, and it's just going to return this dot complete, and set complete with a value, and that's just going to set the attribute. So there's a set attribute method, and it will set that attribute to whatever we pass in. Cool. Now going back to the class definition here that W3C provides us, we can see there's 3 methods that we're going to be using. So the first one is a method called observed attributes, and in there we're going to return an array of attributes that we want to watch. Now every time one of the attributes within the array changes, it will fire this method underneath called attribute changed callback, and that's useful if we want to make our progress bar dynamic. So maybe there's a loop, or maybe there's a HTTP request that we want to use to update the value of the progress bar. We'll put that code in this method. The last method that we're going to be using is connected callback, and all that does is when the element is added to the DOM, that's the method that we call to render it. So let's go back to our code and set these up. So the first one it's a static get, and it's called observed attributes, and we're going to return an array, and the only attribute we're going to need for this demo is complete. We'll then set up the attribute change callback method, and that takes 3 parameters: the name of the attribute, the current value, and the new value. And in there, what we'll do is, just to make sure we set the right attribute, we'll put a switch statement in there, and when name is complete, we'll set the complete variable that we've created, and we'll set it to the new value. And just to make sure that we get an integer, because what we're going to be doing with this value is we're going to be passing it into our template and setting the divs, the inner divs width. So we just got to make sure that it's a number, and if it's not a number, then just default it to 0. And the last thing is we'll set the connected callback. And in here, what we'll do is we'll create our template. So I'll use the backticks so that we can use multiple lines, and it's going to be a really basic component. So there's going to be a container, and it's going to have a class called progress bar, and inside that container we'll have another div, and we'll just give it the class progress bar inner, and that should do it. Then we can add some styling to it as well. So on the progress bar class, we'll just give it a width of 50% of the screen. It can be anything, but just for this demo so we can see what's going on, we'll give it a height of 30 pixels. We'll give it a background color, We'll give it a border radius just to make it look a little bit nicer. 5 pixels, and we'll set the text color to white. And then the inner div, we'll make sure that it's the same height as the container. We'll give the text inside. So what we'll do is we'll just display the current progress as a %. So we'll just set the line height to the same as the height. We'll give the field area its own color so we can actually differentiate. We'll align the text in there to the middle. We'll set the border radius to the same as the container. And finally, we'll give it a transition attribute. And what that will do is if our progress bar is updating in real time, that transition will just animate it and make it look less janky and a little bit more fluid. And here, let's just output this dot complete and then add a % there. Cool. Now we have our template. We want to attach it to our shadow DOM up here. We could do this dot inner HTML equals template, which would change the parent DOM, but we want to change the shadow DOM. So it's the same thing, but you just call this dot shadow. So now we have our connected callback, our attribute change callback, and our observed attributes. Glad I caught that. And just a quick change to our attribute change callback. We want to set the value inside that inner bar, and we want to set the width. So we can do that every time the complete attribute is changed. So the first thing we need to do is get a reference to it. So we'll use query selector method to get the progress bar inner div. And then once the value's been set, we want to set that inner bar's styled width to this dot complete, and then it's going to be a % value, and we're going to set the inner HTML to the same thing. And that should be everything in our class. So now we have that, we have to register it as a custom element. And the way we do that is there's a attribute on window called custom elements, and it has a define method. And what we do is first we set the name of the method, and that's what we'll use to actually call it within our DOM. And then we pass in the class that we just created. Cool. So now we can save that, and we'll save that in as progress bar within our folder. And we'll just create one more file called index, and that's what we'll use to test this out. So we'll set it to HTML, and we'll give the title the web component, and here we'll just do the same thing. We'll add basic styles to it just to make the font slightly more presentable, and we'll just set it to Helvetica for new. Nice and easy. And then we'll import our script. And now we should hopefully be able to test this out. So let's just make sure it works. So I have an alias called serve, and that all that does is fires a simple HTTP server. If you guys want to know how to do that, just drop a comment below and I'll show you. So if we go to localhost on port 8000, hopefully we should see a page. Cool. Let's just pull out the console. Lucky we did. Let's fix that error, refresh that, hopefully that should be good. All right, cool. So now let's test our component. So we should be able to do progress bar, and then we can set a value to 60, for example. But let's take it a step further and have an update in real time. So let's set up a script and we'll put it in an iffy so that it fires straight away. And within that, what we want to do is we want to update this value. Say we want to increase 1% every 100 milliseconds. Set a reference to it. Use document.query selector. We want to find progress bar, and we'll initially have complete as 0, and then let's set up our interval function. So progress interval equals set interval. Now you'll notice that I'm just using ES6 syntax without any transpilers or anything. That's because I'm using the latest version of Chrome. There is a browser support table on the Web Components website, and you can see that Chrome supports everything out of the box, as does Opera. If you're using Firefox, Safari, or Edge, you do have to use polyfills. I will put links in the description for you guys so that you can go in and load your polyfills if you want to, and you'll be able to support browsers all the way back to, I think, Internet Explorer 11. I'll also put a link in for the Polymer framework as well, in case you want to use that instead. So back to the code. On each interval, we're gonna increase the complete number by 1. We'll have it fire every 100 milliseconds, and we'll make sure that it only fires until we're 100% complete. So if complete is less than or equal to 100, we want to set the complete attribute to our complete variable, and if it's more than 100, then we want to clear our interval, and it's called progress interval. Oh, cool. All right, hopefully this works. Let's check it out. Just going back here, and it didn't come up. So what did we do wrong here? We defined it, progress bar, duh. Try that again, and there it is. That's awesome. So that was nice and easy. So that's cool, we now have a component, but it's only really useful if we can actually use it in a project. So next, what I wanted to do is just show you how we could use this component within a sample Angular 2 application. So I'll cancel this server and we'll use Angular CLI. If you've never used Angular CLI and you're interested, I do have some videos out there that just gives you a rundown on how to use it, what it does, and how it can speed up your development. So progress bar demo, it's going to take a second to load all of that. There we go. Cool. So let's load that up. And so I'm going to be lazy, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste this into our assets folder. What we'd usually do is register our component, say to Bower or whatever, and then Bower install it. That way we can maintain versions and all of that. But just for the sake of this demo, we'll do it the easy way. And then in our Angular CLI JSON, we just want to register that script. So here, assets, and it's called progress bar.js. That should load it in. and then we want to put it in our app component. So progress bar, and we won't set complete, we'll just let it go, and hopefully when we run ng-serve, we'll be able to navigate to port 4200. Oh, is it not loaded yet? Oh. So it's giving us an error that it can't resolve that file, and that's just because we need to do that. Oh, and the file name was wrong, so let's try that again. Hopefully this time it should work. Let's see what it says. All right, cool. All right, so we do have an error, and what that error says is if progress bar is an Angular component, and verify that it's part of this module, which it isn't. And if progress bar is a web component, then add custom element schema to the ng module schemas to suppress this message. So we have to go ahead and do one more step. So in our app module file, we just need to import custom element schema, just like that. And then we need to add one more array called schemas and drop that in. And if we go back, it should reload this. Oh, I put it in the wrong place. Should be in Angular core. Oh, it'd help if we got the element name right. And there we go. There it is. Nice and easy. We got there in the end. So that was a very, very quick overview of web components. It's by no means a definitive look at them. I definitely recommend, if you guys are interested, that you look through the documentation. I'll post some links, like I said, in the description. Have a read through. There's already a bunch of elements that have been created, flip cards, game cards, notifications, calendars, and all of that. So there's a lot of information out there for you guys to learn from and have fun. Show me what you guys build.